leadership is ripe with imposter syndrome. So when you're the CEO founder, you did everything and you knew everything because you were crafting it as you went along. But as you grow, and as you gentlemen definitely know, as you scale, things change. And learning to admit, I'm not the expert in this. I hire experts. My job is to be the vision. And so we see it all the time in our rooms. Once you establish that safe environment, then all the vulnerabilities can pop up.
This podcast is brought to you by Fast Slow Motion, a team of expert consultants that have helped thousands of growing businesses build scalable systems on the HubSpot and Salesforce platforms. To learn more, visit www.fastslowmotion.com. Welcome to the Fast Slow Motion podcast, where we explore how to build a business you love while enjoying your life. I'm your host, Eric Housh, and today joined by a very good friend of mine, Fast Slow Motion's Chief Operating Officer, Matt Dyar. Matt, awesome to have you on the show.
Happy to be here, Eric.
Today, we're going to dive into a topic that almost every founder and CEO experiences at some point in the life of their company. As your business grows, complexity grows with it. Teams get bigger, decisions multiply, expectations increase, and the leader who once felt energized by the business can suddenly feel buried by it. So today we're going to talk about how CEOs break out of overwhelm. And to help us explore that, we're joined by someone who's an expert on this. She spends a lot of time in rooms with CEOs having very honest conversations about leadership. Krista Crawford is a Vistage chair who closely works with founders and executives navigating the pressures of growth and leadership. And in her role, she sees patterns across many different types of organizations, and she's got a front row seat to the challenges leaders face as their companies scale. Krista, great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to share today with you.
We are excited to have you here because you have a unique vantage point. You're regularly sitting down with CEOs in environments where they can be vulnerable and honest about what that pressure of leadership really feels like. So, Krista, let's start there. In those rooms with the CEOs, what are some of the things leaders admit privately that they rarely say out loud inside their companies?
I think before I can answer that question, I want to make sure that I have to establish a safe environment for them so that they can actually speak and say the things that they can't say normally in front of their employees. So that's really one of the most important parts, is that you establish the room to have that, we use the phrase all the time, psychologically safe environment, and it really needs to be that. So it's sacred. It doesn't go outside of the room. What we say in the room stays in the room. And what they often talk about are all the things that employees are often talking about. With overwhelm, there's too much on my plate. I'm underwater. Leadership is ripe with imposter syndrome. So when you're the CEO founder, you did everything and you knew everything because you were crafting it as you went along. But as you grow, and as you gentlemen definitely know, as you scale, things change. And learning to admit, I'm not the expert in this. I hire experts. My job is to be the vision. And so we see it all the time in our rooms. Once you establish that safe environment, then all the vulnerabilities can pop up.
Krista, will you unpack for just a minute how you create a safe environment? Because there's an art to it. There's tactics that you have to employ. You can't just come into a room and say, ta-da, you're in a safe space now. So help out the CEOs that are listening. What are some things that they can use with their teams to create that sort of psychological safety you talk about?
In leadership, we often talk about don't ask employees to do something you wouldn't do yourself. That's a phrase we use. I try to model everything that we do. So if I know we're going to go to a really deep place with a member in the room, either personally or business-wise, I'm going to start out with a story in my life, and I open up. And I think that brings the temperature down a little bit. But also, we go back to basics in business. We sign agreements that confidentiality is held in that room. So sometimes I'll say, just a reminder, when you join Vistage, remember we signed that confidentiality agreement. And if we know something big, maybe a CEO is thinking of selling their company, but they don't want their employees to know. One just whisper of that potential can cause chaos. So sometimes it's being more direct, but the best way that we establish that is creating those connections both in the room throughout their Vistage journey and outside of the room, encouraging them to do networking together, have lunch. If you've got an issue and you can't wait until the next monthly Vistage meeting, pick up the phone and call one of your colleagues. It's that connection that I can't control, but I completely encourage. And so they're different pieces that you can do. But I think modeling is really important for whoever's chairing or leading an organization.
We were talking about, CEOs are carrying a lot. What percentage of that would you say you're unpacking personal issues versus professional issues?
And, this is not hard data. I don't keep tick marks throughout meetings, but I'm going to say about 40% of what we discuss has to do in some way about personal, and the rest is business, because they're interrelated. If things are not going well, if you have a sick parent, significant other, or child, you can't fully focus and be in the room. If you're having your own health issues, you can't fully focus and be in the room. So just bring it to the group. There will be someone in that room that has had a similar experience. I think the best learning often goes, I went through that and here's what I did and it failed. If I had to do it over again, this is what I would do. The people in the room have the best resources. They know the other attorneys and the CPAs and the counselors and the psychologists and the psychiatrists in their geographic region, more so than I do. The power in the group members. My job is just to facilitate the discussion.
Nobody's out there on an island, right? There's always someone who's been there, done that, has a perspective on it. We talked about complexity in the business, and I think we're probably going to circle back to that. We talked about this identity shift that happens as businesses scale. We talked about just now leaders feeling like they're on an island. They're alone. What other sources do you see that sense of overwhelm come from?
The number of decisions that they have to make. If you haven't trained your executive leadership team to absorb a lot of that decision making, then CEOs will feel that it all is on their shoulders. So part of what we do in Vistage is to encourage them to get their organizations to the point that you want to go away for a month. You should have a team that can handle it. Yeah, you might need to check in a few times, but decision making, the number of decisions that leaders make, from dollars to people to products to vendors, they should have a stream that lanes that they can send things to. I'm going out of town. You have it. You have control. If you need me, grab me. But otherwise, I trust you. So you have to build to that level of trust. If you don't have the people reporting to you that you trust to make those decisions, that's another discussion we need to have in the room. You need to get there. Otherwise, you'll never be able to step away from your business. So the great number of decisions that they have to make. The idea of, you said the isolationism. The other part is, who can you turn to? Who are those trusted advisors? Where are the fast, slow folks trying to help us, get to scale? Identifying those trusted advisors that you can pick up the phone and call, and they're going to help you. And that requires encouraging our Vistage members to talk to a lot of people, get to know a lot of resources. The more they know you and the more they know your company, the more they can help you. So reaching out, learning that it is okay to say, I can't do this on my own, nor should I. I should not be the expert on everything because I'm missing so much if I think I am.
Yeah, where do you see that tipping point occur inside organizations? Because a lot of companies are started with a hero model. The entrepreneur starts the business. It's a flat organization. They do it all, and for a while that works. So where do you see that tipping point happen where, the rent comes due, like it all backs up, and now they don't have that leadership team to turn to. They don't have those trusted advisors. When should they be looking out for that tipping point?
Here's one, and this is not official by any means whatsoever.
We're unofficial here, Krista.
Yeah.
This is all unofficial, all right? This is experience talking.
When I start hearing them saying, I think I need an administrative assistant, then I know that they need an administrative assistant, and they probably need a chief operating officer, and they probably need to go beyond just the bookkeeper. But when they start thinking, I think I need an administrative assistant, it's like, then you definitely do. And you need XXX. I ask my members, how many appointments have you missed in the last month? How many calls do you have to return, or emails or LinkedIn messages that are backed up? All of those are signs that you just can't do it all. And it's time to invest in quality leadership folks to help you.
Krista, I imagine that shift almost leaning into their own vulnerability, right? Realizing just how isolated they are. That mental shift of realizing, hey, it looks like I have all the control, but I really need a hand here. I imagine that can cause some emotional strife for folks in this transition. How real is that from what you see in your work?
Sure. You're the one who's been the marketing person. You're the one who's made the finance decisions. What a leap of faith to hire someone and hand that over. Now, you don't just obviously hand it over immediately. There should be a plan and a training program and ways to identify when some corrections need to be made, but you have to do it. And so you have to hire someone that fits your culture, that fits your values and your purpose, and someone that either has a track record in your industry or not. Maybe you bring in someone that you just trust and has skills and you train them. But at some point, there has to be a leap of faith. At some point, you have to stop holding hands, stop going to the meetings with them and say, today's the day. You're on your own. I'm a text away if you need me. And if that goes well, then you've just opened up space and time for that CEO to focus on the most important part, growth. If you are so overwhelmed that you can't take on this next client because you don't have the space, growth is another thing where we see that people decide, oh, I really do need some help. And that's the whole purpose of our business, right? To grow, whether it's to grow, in multiples, or whether it's just to grow in terms of providing more resources for your staff or more benefits for your staff, whatever that CEO's definition of growth is. They want a lifestyle business, you still have to grow. You want to have a business that's in the billions in revenues, you really need to grow.
So for leaders who are looking to scale their organization and they have this moment of isolation and they don't have the team, is there a framework you've seen on how to develop a leadership team around you to elevate employees into those leadership positions? Is there somewhere you see a entrepreneur starting? Do they start in operations? Do they start in marketing? Do they start in sales? Do they start in finance? Is there a playbook here that you've seen work?
Yes, the answer is all of those. Thinking about the members in my Vistage group, without giving any details, because confidentiality is prime, I have someone who started their very successful business out of the back of their pickup truck. And I have others that started the subsidiary of a European organization, the first US subsidiary. So they had some structure to go with, but they started it from ground zero. I have people that were bookkeepers that went on to be CPAs, that went on to have successful, I have someone who has 30 CPAs that work for them, and they started just from the very beginning. Some with degrees and some not. I just interviewed someone who's not in my group, but I interviewed someone a couple of weeks ago, and they were living out of a car. And then about 20 years later, they sold their business for $250 million without a degree. Ultimately, they got a degree, but there isn't I wish I could give you the magic formula that if you do A, B, C, and D, you'll have this. We do have things you can do that will obviously help you. But I can't tell you, here's the starting point. It's not like the Monopoly game where you start every place, we go back to jail and start all over again. There isn't, as far as I can tell, a magic formula for that. Vistage peer groups can help you. And that's why I do what I do, because you learn from the frameworks that our organization presents, the content, brand, and materials that we have, but you learn the most from the other individuals in the room. You learn from their successes and you learn from their failures, and you grow together. What I love about working with the company that I do is the entire reason people are in that room is to grow and to help each other's grow. That's it. That's the reason they're there. That's the reason I'm there. And it helps me grow as a human each time.
Krista, interested in leaning into the inflection point where you've dealt with and helped and seen a lot of leaders that moved from this space of isolation and overwhelm to clarity and confidence. Have you seen anything that tends to mark that turning point?
Couple of things. When someone starts talking about an operations manager,
Right.
yeah, because that's really letting go of a lot of the verticals and a lot of the horizontals that they're doing. So with that, ops manager is kind of the key. And when you hear them start using language like processes, execution, need to improve the onboarding and training process, when they really start honing into those important critical pieces of the formula for successful business, their language changes just a little bit. It takes a while for them to get comfortable with that. And some it takes longer than others to let go of some of those pieces. But once they start to open up and let go and they get some successes, then they're open to other things. If they have failures, then you go back a little bit. You got to get the confidence back up. I don't know about you guys, but I have a background in HR and not everybody I hired worked out well. It just happens, but it does. People tend to personalize that. Like, what did I do wrong? Sometimes you didn't do anything wrong. It looks like a great fit. You've done the training. It just didn't work out. Sometimes some processes could be improved and the onboarding could be improved.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you've been in HR, I believe, for almost 30 years. So you've got a lot of experience. You've been doing HR consulting for 30 plus years, which probably led you into the Vistage community and being a chair. Specifically, what HR advice would you give to leaders of organizations as they're starting to scale?
So first I want to say, I no longer do direct HR consulting because the rules and regs are so different for communities, cities, states, nationally, and I don't devote the time to stay up to date on that. But the way you approach people in general shouldn't change that much. So I do discuss, ways to handle what I see happening in HR and what you deal with is this scaling and automation. How do you handle massive numbers? As your company grows, how do you deal with all of that? And how do you stay on top of it? And how do you know that should you get audited or are you following all regulations? So reaching out to organizations that can help you do that. You can't possibly stay on top of everything. One of the, mantras that I've used for 30 years is treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you keep that mantra, it's not always the same because maybe you've got a tougher skin than some people, but ask yourself, if someone were to need to let me go, how would I want them to do that? Would I want them to slowly pull the Band-Aid off, or would I want them to rip the Band-Aid off? Would I want them to provide some medication to help the healing? How would you handle it? What fits your purpose? What fits your values in your organization? And what fits you in terms of how you handle employees?
Okay, last HR question because I'm curious. There's usually two schools of thoughts here, but as leaders are growing and adding to their head count, do you have any recommendations to them around outsourcing the recruitment versus doing it in-house?
I think it comes down to the industry. If you deal with a lot of 1099s, so people that aren't direct employees, they're contract employees, outsourcing might be the right way to go. If you have a boutique type of business, then my gut reaction to that would be you need to be doing that yourself. If people are coming into a brick and mortar organization, the more you can engage with them personally, I think the better. But so many of the organizations now work remotely. They do not have a brick and mortar. They have an address that things can go to and that you can fill out contracts on. But then outsourcing might be the appropriate way. It depends on your culture. And do you want to have one-on-one personal relationships between your leadership staff and your employees? Doing it yourself might be better. If not, if they're spread out all over the country, I don't know how you can keep all of that in-house. unless you basically hire your own outsource inside your company.
Let's actually stay there for a minute, Matt, because I think this is something we do pretty well, being a completely dispersed company, not really having an HQ, so to speak. Talk through some of the strategies we at FSM use to find, onboard, and get people bought into our culture.
Yeah. So networking, being out and about, with finding an outsourcing organization that specializes in the types of products. No one has exactly your product. I know that. But the processes that you use, just any outsourcing HR group isn't going to fit what you do. So interviewing a minimum of 3 to 5 outsourcing companies, interview them just like you're hiring them as an employee. You ask them all similar questions, but then have unique questions for each organization. And I would give them, if it were me, I would set up some mock situations. We need to hire X, Y at this rate and da-da-da-da-da. Tell me what your plan is. I'm going to give you 24 hours to come back with some possible candidates and see what they do. Test them, because there are a lot of HR outsourcing companies out there now, and you should have lots of choices. Was that helpful?
Eric, it's almost like Krista's read our playbook.
It's almost like she did. I love it.
I did it.
Krista, you mentioned process earlier, and I think we see this a lot, and that folks will come in, they'll buy a CRM. They think the CRM is going to be this silver bullet that fixes their business. And what we try to do is get them to back up a bit and get them to think about the process and how the process should be architected. And that's a shift almost from reactive to proactive, right? They're starting to think now, instead of what's on fire here, how should I be thinking differently about my business? When you see leaders make that shift from reactive to being more intentional, what are some of the common themes you see in how they approach decisions differently?
So you have to give authority if you're going to share decision making. Then you must give authority. And that's really hard for particularly CEO founders, because they've had the final decision-making authority. Giving people dollar amounts or head counts, giving them some metrics to work within. So if it's between X and $1,000, go for it, or X and $10,000, or X and $100,000, depending on the size of your company, run with it. Initially, when you are building out your processes, put in those little checkpoints. Okay, for the first month, check in with me every other day and let's see how things are going. Or for the next 2 weeks, whatever your time frame is, depending on how long your process is in going from start to finish of your product. So giving people some rope, but giving them a safe space to land too. So that if a mistake is made, and mistakes will be made, we're all human, that those initial mistakes are caught to where they don't continue to snowball and get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's one of those ways you establish psychological safety, is giving people some protection, giving them their safety belt, if you will, their seat belt to stay safe.
Krista, what it kind of sounded like, and we've heard it a couple times. I like the way that you said it around giving authority. Internally, we talk about kind of I may get it wrong, but it's like the 5 stages of delegation is kind of what I heard from you. It's really hard to give authority without trust. And this is something that a lot of leaders struggle with. Totally get it, totally understand it, can empathize with it. But what we talk about as a leader is like, you do it and let someone, you do it. And then stage 2 is you do it and let someone watch. And then stage 3, it kind of progresses from then they do the activity and you watch, and then they do the activity and bring it back to you. And then finally they can fully do the activity and get the authority. So what I would say is that it is really difficult to give trust and authority day one. That's what you work towards, utilizing kind of a delegation framework.
Yeah. So in the medical field, it's see one, do one, teach one.
There you go.
And that's basically what you want to do in terms of business as well. That trust factor, everything comes back to trust. I posted something this week on LinkedIn about self-trust. It takes strong self-trust to let go and trust others. So you have to trust yourself that you're already making good decisions, that you can train well, that you can show them the right thing to do. And I see leaders losing that self-trust sometimes, and you have to build that back up again. Next question you're going to ask me is, how do you build that back up? So I'm going to go ahead and answer it. So you ask questions of yourself. How did you get here? How did I get here? What have I done that I did really, really well this week? Because we do start to doubt ourselves at times. When the company starts slipping through no fault of your own, it happens. Businesses have cycles. You need to have those, here's what I did really well this week. You need to pat yourself on the back. You also need that trusted advisor, that trusted friend, preferably one that's not in your company, preferably one you have in a peer group, preferably one that that they're going to be honest with you in a caring way, that they're not going to see you through a negative lens. They're going to see you as being authentic. They're going to know that if they do this for you and they give you an honest feedback, that you're going to do the same for them when it's needed. So establishing those relationships and having that person outside of your business and outside of your family.
As you know, Krista, Eric and I are both in Vistage groups here in the Birmingham area, and we went through an exercise here recently that really supports what you're talking about. We actually walked through the Vistage values, and two of them are caring and challenge. And what you just described, how you communicate as a team, really takes me back to Kim Scott's radical candor, because y'all's values line up 100% with radical candor, and that, you care personally and you challenge directly. It's right there. 2 of your 4 values outline this very, very clearly. And I would encourage listeners to not only seek out a peer group where those values exist, but work really hard to build the culture of your organization around radical candor as well.
A phrase that we have in Vistage is being carefrontational. So it's a made-up word, but it's someone giving you advice, direct advice, but in a caring manner. And the hard truths, we need to hear them. And who is going to give another CEO a hard truth other than a CEO? Your employees can't, for fear they'll lose their job, even if you've given them psychological safety. You can't talk about things with your family because you might frighten them. And you don't want to do that. You can't talk about if something's not going well. It's not, and that's not good dinner conversation. So you want to have a real human personal life at home. And so finding a peer that you can talk with is really important. And just be honest as you can be to yourself. So it takes that self-trust to do that as well.
One of the things we say internally is clarity is kindness. It's not always comfortable, but it is absolutely the path forward. Krista, you just mentioned something around the impact of these business changes and these intentional shifts and the shift from clarity to confidence. How does that impact the CEO's family, and how does that impact them personally in their social spheres, maybe outside of the business?
They're completely related. What happens at home and what happens in business. Back in a previous century, we were taught to keep business and home completely separate. And you weren't supposed to talk about your personal life, and you weren't supposed to bring any of that. And fortunately, we have learned in the business community that doesn't work, because everything impacts. And we kind of I mentioned it earlier. If someone is sick in your family, it's hard to be 100% focused in your business. So what I recommend that leaders do is bring that into your business. Say, look, I'm a little off today. My kid has strep throat. I didn't get very much sleep last night. I'm going to be as present as I can. But if it looks like I'm not paying attention to you, just snap fingers and let me know I'm a little sleepy. It is amazing how vulnerability, once you do that, then employees feel free that they can say too. They don't have to fake it. They can say, look, I'm here, but I don't feel 100%. I think since COVID, when we hear someone say they don't feel 100%, we tend to say, well, why don't you go home? You can work from home today. But people didn't have that permission before, and now we do. We can own that. So trying to protect their families from not needing to know all the chatter that's going on in their business. I think it's important. I also think in some families, it's also important that they know what's going on. A significant number of businesses are family-owned businesses, and That's where you really need some peer support outside of the family, because you need a safe space to talk about. But a significant number of, peer groups and businesses are family owned, whether it's 100% family owned or a portion.
So I know you have a whole presentation around how to bring fun into the workplace. Is there anything else that you can draw from that framework that would assist in, say, CEO kind of reaching that place where they're enjoying work again?
Yes, absolutely. I think thinking about why they started the business, then we get back to the why, and encouraging them to remember when they were at the height of enjoying the business and trying to figure out what they were doing at that time. Was it the ideation, the creation? Was it the networking? What is it that they were doing? There's a technique we have in the HR field called job crafting, where you figure out the pieces that give you the most enjoyment. And usually for leaders, we're getting the most joy when we're giving the most. It may not be what we're doing, it's what we're giving. So getting back to those basics and figure out how you can do more of that. And maybe that's offloading some tasks that take up a lot of your time, but they're not moving the company forward. Figure out the things that invigorate you and energize you. Sometimes it's as simple as going out and managing by walking around, whether that's virtually or whether that's truly walking around and just checking in with people, getting to know your employees, getting to hear what's going on with their families for those that want to share. Not every employee wants to share. Trying not to establish a company that's cookie cutter, where we treat everyone exactly the same, because we're not the same. And I think those are old rules that don't apply anymore. We have to break that up. So figure those things out. The example that I share is, if you like doing spreadsheets, do more spreadsheets. I'm sure there's a place you can do that. Me, I like presenting and being in front of groups, and I'm very social. So I'm a Vistage chair now. I went from being an HR director to being an adjunct professor to chairing a peer group. It's not my job to be the smartest person in the room. It's my job to facilitate those really smart people to do what they do. That's my job now. And I love it. So I've crafted, or Vistage crafted for me. I just didn't know it existed. And so I get to do what I really love to do. And I think you guys do too.
Absolutely. Krista, we've hit on a lot today. I feel like this is just going to be a really powerful episode for a lot of folks out there in our audience. Is there anything when you talk about this shift from overwhelming to clarity that we haven't hit on yet that you feel like may be really important to bring up?
Yeah, I think and I work with the 3 C's: clarity, confidence, and cadence. So if you are clear about what the goals are, the metrics, your why, your purpose, your values, and employees can then have clarity, they can be confident that they're going to be able to execute for you because everybody's aligned on those. But I think clarity is so important to begin with. And to get that clarity, you have to have your foundationals. It always comes back to foundationals. If you don't really know why what you're doing, how are employees supposed to know that? And then as the organization changes, you can recraft some of that because you're responding to market needs. How you go about doing things right now should be completely different than it was 2 years ago. If you're not leaning into AI and processes and scaling, then you're missing so many opportunities. And then finding your cadence. The cadence in how you interact with others, the cadence in how you're going to deliver what it is in your part of the process, and the cadence of when to go home and get refreshed. The old oxygen mask first, it's tried and true. If you're not sleeping, you cannot be as effective at work. If you don't have a safe space to go home to, then you need to work on that. You need to put as much attention in growing your home life as you do in your business, on balance. It doesn't always work out every day that way, and I know that. But on balance, it needs to be a place that recharges you, that you can give there and get just as much as you give and get in your place of business.
Love that. Krista, as we draw close to our time together, we always like to ask our guests one final question. What's one quote or piece of advice that's made a super significant impact on you personally as a leader?
I read a lot of business leaders, but I'm going to quote my grandmother on this. My grandmother finished the 8th grade formally, but she was one of the most well-read. She listened to music. She was just an amazing country Ozark woman. And the phrase that she used with me is she would say, Krista, the difference between if and when, not if you're going to do something, but when you do something. And the place she started with that is she said, not if you go to college, when you go to college. So it was never in doubt for me. So talking with employees, try to get rid of the ifs some of the times and put the whens in there. And that can be WHEN or WIN. It's a long quote, but Grandma, I miss you.
Matt, any final thoughts?
Wrapping this all, I love that you brought it back to the why. I think that's so powerful, and love the quote from your grandmother. I think that's really applicable as well. So, no, thank you so much for being on here, Chris. I think we learned a lot today. Really appreciate all of your experience and your wisdom, and keep investing in those leaders. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. This was fun. And you know me, I like to have some fun while I do my work.
Awesome. Well, Krista, again, thank you. Just to echo Matt here, if you're listening, you want to learn more about Krista and her work with executive leaders, we're going to have a bunch of links and resources in the show notes. You can all catch our previous episodes at fastslowmotion.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And we covet your feedback. If you have any ideas of topics you want us to hit on or ways we could re-architect the show to make it better and more effective for you, please let us know at fastslowmotion.com/podcast. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.